Donald Trump has made some more statements where it's clear Kuzma USMCA is not going to be extended and Canada needs to prepare for that. One of the ways Canada can prepare, of course, is with some major projects, including pipelines. Turns out there's some hidden pipeline facts that would have been important for Canadians and Americans to know. Speaking of, Marco Rubio made some interesting comments with Trump about some of the changes in international relations we could expect moving forward. And this is another shared thing that Canada and the US have, including our domestic problems with some of the foreign entrepreneurs, and the fraud scams continue to get worse. Canada and the US both need to shut this down. As we can see, it's happening in both countries, and now it's getting to the point where Canadians are getting turned away from hospitals. There is a lot to talk about in today's video, so let's get into it.
Your house will be renamed after California. What did you talk about with Prime Minister Carney and Mexican President Sheinbaum when you were here just a few days earlier?
Mexico and Canada, we met with the, as you know, I mean, it was pretty well, a lot of people were here, right here we met. And the Prime Minister of Canada, President of Mexico, and we spoke for a half hour. Very good, very productive. Talked mostly trade.
Will you restart negotiations
Honestly, a little off topic, but he's looking sharp in the tux, so shout out to him.
with Canada?
Oh, well, look, I have a great relationship with Canada. They're very tough traders, but I have a very good relationship with the Prime Minister and with Canada.
And you had said you would halt those negotiations earlier after the tariff.
Well, I have halted them.
And so will you restart them?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, you know, the problem is Canada makes a lot of things that we don't need because we make them also. But we'll work it out. Look, Canada's a special place, and they really are good at ice hockey, aren't they?
I laughed at that when I saw the clip. Like, oh, they're really good at ice hockey. And before you Americans say you keep winning all the Stanley Cups, most of the rosters have been Canadians. He did say a bunch of important things there, which, you know, you could run with for a while. But the important thing that he said, which is what I've been trying to get this idea across to Canadians, is there's a lot of things that are manufactured in Canada, which used to be manufactured in the States, where there's not necessarily a competitive edge for Canada. There are a lot of things that Canada does have the competitive edge in that would be amazing for us to build a relationship around with the US. That would be awesome from a geopolitical standpoint, where Canada would win, the US would win, and it wouldn't be 2 + 2 = 4. It would be 2 + 2 = 5 because of the compounding effect of how strong it would be for both nations to onshore all of this stuff. And I think we're seeing that even the political pundits know Canada's going to have to figure out other solutions, because Trump did say we'll work it out. Let's get into a few of his comments here, because I have a couple other things to say.
Now is Scott Reed. He's CTV's political commentator. Scott, happy Monday to you.
He's also a little bit insane.
Carney, he met with the Prime Minister and President Sheinbaum. So those comments last night from the president take on a slightly different meaning. What did you make of what we heard from Trump last night?
You know, it is a real shoulder shrug. You don't quite know what to make of Trump. I mean, this is the fundamental takeaway, which is that he is unpredictable and unreliable. But what I'm really driving at is you hear him consistently speak in positive tones, even friendly tones with respect to the Prime Minister. You see their interactions at the FIFA event, bizarre, grotesque affair that it was.
It's funny for him to talk about the FIFA event being bizarre and how, you know, Trump's so hard to read because he says positive things about Carney, and when he's with him, he shakes his hand. Do you not understand how negotiations work? Like, this is the problem with liberals and the way that their brains work. It's that, like, how could you even be nice to a person you disagree with? How can these two people, who evidently are not on the same page since we don't have a deal, how are they cordial in person? It makes no sense. What do you expect them to fist fight on site? Like, what do you mean?
And he's shaking hands and smiling and seeming friendly. But then his commentary and his actions with respect to trade are barefanged hostility. So it's hard to know what to make of it exactly, other than this rather pessimistic analysis, which is that Trump has been consistent in saying that he does not like the multilateral North American Free Trade Agreement. He wants bilateral deals, and one presumes he likes bilateral deals so that he can exert his leverage, use his muscle, and try to impose more tariffs across the board in a variety of sectors.
It's funny because he called him inconsistent and unreliable, and then he says, well, he has actually been pretty consistent in what he wants. Yes, we know. Kuzma USMCA is done. Canada has to be prepared that that negotiation is over and there will be bilateral trade agreements between Canada and the US and Mexico and the US. And Canada wants to be able to come to the table with actual leverage, especially since Mexico is now becoming the largest trading partner.
Is time on our side, though, Scott?
I hope so. And I think you've actually put your finger on the one possible reason for hope. Because if it's left to Trump and his devices, chances are North American free trade as we know it is dead in the water. However, if Donald Trump finds that the high water, to continue the analogy, of political grief starts to rise around him, if he starts to see that his political support, his approval rating according to one poll is at 36%, that is absolutely abysmal for an American president. If he finds that his MAGA base in particular is starting to question why their Ford F-150 costs $1,800 more.
That's because we've bought $2 million in Canada to buy the First Nations off so they could sign the agreement to shut up. So the demand for the F-150 skyrocketed because of my plan, but could work out.
People start feeling the pinch of jobs and they blame that on the president. And if the stock market begins to react negatively, because Trump is very sensitive to market movements, then you might see him begin to retreat. That is our only hope. And that hope is that over time, the consequences of this tariff policy will start to take a bite out of Donald Trump's political support.
So here is the thing that liberals also don't understand. Yes, when they add tariffs, there is the intention to make foreign-produced products more expensive so that people buy American. There will be a transitionary period where Americans start to experience higher prices. The point is, during this transition period where there will be pain, the manufacturing is onshored, the investment goes into the US, more Americans are hired, and eventually it creates a longer-term solution that is better for America. But liberals, Democrats, left-leaning people for some reason have the inability to see more than 15 minutes into the future, and that's how we end up with tweets like this starting to go viral. So this is from Wealth Moose. You guys might have seen this going around, but every Canadian should read this twice. Canada ranks first in uranium, first in potash, second in nickel, third in oil, fifth in gold, first in freshwater. Countries start wars for less than this, and somehow we are told we're too poor to cut taxes, too broke to build homes, too weak to compete, and too small to matter. It took historic levels of incompetence and ideological sabotage to bury a country this blessed. Imagine where Canada would be if it were actually allowed to win. And yes, we are being held back. And again, when I'm talking about this transitionary period, the thing that is good for Americans is your pain means hopefully a better future. And the differences in Canada is our pain means a worse future because we have not felt the layoffs yet in Canada. We have not felt the economic blowback yet in Canada. In the US, they haven't got the benefits yet. All of these jobs being announced, none of the factories are completed or built. Yes, some of them are relaunching, they're coming online, they're adding new shifts. There are some changes, but Canada has not felt. Most of Canada's high-profile layoffs, the tens of thousands of jobs, are all between January to March, April, May, and the US will eventually be getting those jobs, so it will be better for them. And this is why Canada needs to push through the bullcrap that we're getting through the media, because Table Salt put this tweet out here. Christine Clark reveals that while BC maintains an oil tanker ban, the Valdez Marine Terminal in Alaska sends an oil tanker with 2 million barrels of oil every single day, only 20 kilometers from Victoria, along the coast of Vancouver Island on the US side. And he posted this photo to make the visual a little easier. So you have this up in Alaska. You can follow where the this is obviously not the exact, but roughly the path that it takes to get the oil down to here. And this is the disputed area here that is holding all of Canada back because for some reason, this little, well, they talk about how dangerous it is, and maybe it is, but I'll sure as heck tell you that Canadians are not being told that this is the pathway of oil tankers daily as we continue to hold Canada back, shut down projects, not allow Canada to move forward. This is happening regardless. Some of which I guess there's some dredging solutions to make this easier and safer. And we got this article here, and it's from Resource Works, Building Canada's Future. And they said, here's what they don't tell you about BC tanker ban. Crude oil tankers have sailed and docked on the British Columbia coast for more than 70 years with no spills. Fuel dependence on the remote BC coast. Remote coastal settlements are entirely dependent on fuel shipments, and Bella Bella is no different. It has no road or power grid connections, and the little seaside village is dominated by large fuel tanks that have to be refilled regularly by barge to keep the lights on. Alaska North Slope crude has been shipped by tanker to Washington and beyond for more than 60 years. Yes, there's a North Coast exclusion zone where the US-bound tankers go west around Haida Gwaii rather than down the inside passage, but once the ships reach Vancouver Island, they sail right inside, right past Victoria to refineries at Cherry Point, March Point, and other US stops. Through the tall windows of the Vancouver Convention Center, you can watch Aframax crude tankers sail past under the Second Narrows and Lionsgate bridges after loading diluted bitumen crude from the expanded Westridge terminal in Burnaby. This is, of course, the west end of the TMX pipeline, which has operated since 1954 with no spills, including the branch line down the Cherry Point complex. And he ends with one of the most important parts here, the idea that the North Coast can host fuel barges, LNG tankers, bunker-fired cruise ships, and freighters, but can't tolerate Canadian crude along with the US tankers is a silly urban myth, and proving how a better relationship with the US could allow us to help this infrastructure and the logistics create better solutions for both countries. But speaking of solutions for both countries, let's get into Marco Rubio's stuff, because I think there's some shared ideas there between Canada and the US.
The president views the last 40 years as an era of which American workers and American farmers have been ripped off. They've been ripped off, and what he's saying is we want to have trade with the world, but it has to be a trade in which American businesses and American workers and the products they make and what American farmers grow and produce has a fair shot to be sold around the world. On issue after issue, that's been the case. You talk about foreign aid reforms. This is not our money. This is taxpayer money. When the president has said is we're going to do foreign aid, but we're going to do foreign aid for countries that are aligned with the United States and in a way that doesn't waste the taxpayers' money.
So he said a bunch of important things in only 35 seconds. The most important, and I wish Canadian politicians would remember this, it's not government investment. It's not government spending. It is taxpayer dollars. Every dollar you waste is the taxpayer's future. And in the US, even though there's lots of spending, at least they can acknowledge it's taxpayer dollars, which is very, very important. Another thing that's interesting is they're talking about cutting foreign aid for countries that are hostile to America. Canada should be doing the same thing. If there's countries that don't align with our values, if there's countries that don't benefit us, maybe we shouldn't be sending them hundreds of millions of dollars. And I'm not even going to go into the side tangent of how a lot of this foreign aid has actually been a net negative for most of these nations. And I'm also not going to go to the side tangent how America is clearly the current global empire, and usually global empires would be extracting resources from nations, not giving them resources in aid, especially since a lot of these countries don't even like America. Like, we're seeing what's happening with all of the Somali scams and all of the food scams. That happens in Canada, and later in the video, I'm going to show some examples of food scams of countries, and don't worry, it does involve Operation Curry Bomb, because this needs to be addressed. American politicians are not calling them out at all, but when it comes to foreign aid and foreign involvement, we've seen this sentiment start to heat up. That Canadians support sending troops to Poland if Russia invades, and allegedly the number is as high as 66% of Canadians. And I will say this, Poland has some of the highest military spending. I don't see Russia wanting to go against them. Strategically, it would make no sense, but it's hilarious to see that high of a percentage of Canadians wanting to send boots on the ground. So I figured, you know what? I actually agree. We should send boots on the ground. And why don't we send Canada's top elite super soldiers, and we have just the crew right here, honoring the Sikh Canadian soldiers, a legacy of service and sacrifice. We got the boys right there, and they were just featured on the Remembrance Day stamp, because we were told in Canada this past Remembrance Day that these guys were so integral, and by these guys I mean this crew right here, are so integral to Canada's armed forces that Canada would not have won either of the world wars without these guys. So I say, get them on a ship, get them on the front lines, and they can defend Europe from Russia. And they'll argue with you ad nauseum online that the European forces wouldn't even have won without these guys. So they are our elite soldiers. Let's get them out there on the front lines defending Europe. We can just have full squads and battalions of these guys and send them out there. Now, speaking of ad nauseum, we got this story here that has to do with Canada's free healthcare system and what the implications of Operation Curry Bomb and mass immigration have had on Canada's healthcare system.
Well, 2 Lower Mainland hospitals are warning the public they'll be turning away pregnant patients going into labor on certain dates. It's due to a shortage shortage of obstetricians. Both Maple Ridge Hospital and Peace Arch Hospital in White Rock are periodically implementing what's known as maternity diversion. That means patients in labor arriving on their own will be redirected to other hospitals, and ambulances will also take them elsewhere.
We want patients to feel secure. We apologize for the stress that this might cause. We are, one of the largest health authorities in the province. Certainly in terms of maternity deliveries, we are the largest across our 8 sites.
You know what those areas are also having a problem with is mass immigration. And also in Canada right now, almost 40% of mothers are foreign born, which means direct relation from immigration to overwhelmed hospitals can be proved. So now, as countrywide, people are paying their taxes to have free healthcare, quotes on the free, we are now not getting access to the healthcare we're paying for. You are getting turned away at the hospital because the hospitals cannot handle the demand for mass immigration. So you'd think the solution would be to cut the amount of immigration, the amount of temporary people we have in Canada, which is in the millions. But no, instead we've got this solution. Let's get into this.
Federal government has introduced an express entry category for foreign-trained doctors. Officials say it's intended to address health workforce challenges in Canada.
To recruit the doctors we need, to retain the ones we have, and to cut processing times to ensure it all gets done quickly.
The government says the program gives physicians a pathway to permanent residence to fill crucial gaps. Foreign-trained doctors who are nominated will get expedited 14-day work permit processing. There will be 5,000 federal admission spots, as well as provincial and territorial allocations.
So we are going to have essentially no background checks on these doctors coming through. And Canada's already been doing a great job with the background checks so far, especially when it comes to fraudulent documents and finding out their criminal history. I was just reading an article recently about how many doctors are active in Canada with criminal investigations from other countries. So now what we're going to do is bring in thousands of them, process them in 14 days instead of just cutting down immigration. And Riley Donovan put out this tweet here, and he said they flooded hospitals with immigration. Their solution was more foreign doctors. They flooded housing with immigration. Their solution is more immigrant house builders. Can we just get off this surreal merry-go-round and end mass migration? And the numbers are so simple. There's over 3 million people in Canada right now on temporary status. That would be over 30 million in the US, and that does not include the millions over the last 5 years who have gotten PR. In 2024, there was another 500,000. 2023, another 500,000. Clogging up all of these systems. So instead of cutting immigration, remigration, all of the ways to salute, this is the same thing as if somebody keeps gaining weight and telling them the solution for their problems gaining weight is to buy bigger clothes so they can just fit into the bigger clothes. Oh, you keep gaining weight and your clothes don't fit? Just buy bigger pants, man. Now, speaking of gaining weight, we do have this food bank story, which also could be connected to mass immigration. There's some other things we'll have to address in here too. But I didn't even get into the fact that mass immigration in Canada has been used to prop up Canada's economy, and that's why we haven't invested in all those natural resources thing. That could be a whole video in itself. But let's get into this here because, again, yes, mass immigration's a problem. There's something else too. Perhaps, maybe. We'll make a few guesses.
Thank you. Brody Tyler Dawson goes to his local food bank about once a week to stock up on essentials. He's unable to work due to an injury, and with the rising cost of groceries, he's been struggling to keep up financially. But he says it's around the holiday season where he really feels the pinch.
Any resource with food right now is significantly helpful to anybody that is struggling with the crisis with food prices.
He is too injured to work, so he has to rely on the food bank. So maybe he should consider finding a job that wouldn't be a physical job. Maybe there's something else you could do. We do live in a pretty digital world. I'm sure there's some online jobs he could look for that wouldn't require himself to need the food bank. That being said, almost every single food bank across all of Canada is running out of food because demand keeps increasing. One is because of the cost of living, made worse because of mass immigration. Two, there's also immigrants coming in through mass immigration, going and using the food bank, and that is food literally getting taken out of the mouth of local Canadians. And like I said, Canada has not even felt the full negative effects of the trade war yet, of the trade negotiations, of the layoffs. So this is only going to get worse. But when it comes to taking food out of the mouth out of the local populations, I just want to show how shared this problem is between Canada and the US. And we have Lynchburg business owner charged with a food stamp and wire fraud from the Department of Justice. And in Lynchburg, Virginia, a federal grand jury returned an indictment Wednesday charging a Lynchburg business owner with federal food stamp and wire fraud, according to the Department of Justice. 59-year-old Rajan Babar of Lynchburg, Virginia, the owner of Taste of India, was accused of fraud regarding SNAP. The grand jury has charged Babar with 1 count of SNAP benefits fraud, 3 counts of wire fraud, 4 counts of transacting in criminally derived property. According to the indictment, in 2016, Babar filed paperwork for Taste of India to become SNAP retailer. In December 2016, the United States Department of Agriculture's Food and Nutrition Services approved the application. Officials say that beginning around April 2021, the SNAP sales at Taste of India reportedly skyrocketed from their previous level. According to the DOJ, 2018 to 2020, the average SNAP sales at the store were around $5,000 a month, but from 2021 to 2022, the average SNAP sales were $53,000 a month. In 2023, 2024, SNAP sales were about $60,000 per month. The indictment reports that Babar allowed people to exchange their SNAP benefits for cash. Officials say that Babar allegedly rang up false transactions for non-existent food items and other products and then provided those people with cash for about 1/2 the value of the SNAP benefits. As you can see, Operation Curry Bomb is a problem in America as well, and you guys need to hold your politicians accountable because India is almost never mentioned. But from this single case alone, of course, it's just one restaurant, but there would have been hundreds of people from that community participating in the fraud just as much. The Somali fraud is a big issue, but as we've talked about on the channel with the H-1Bs, the temporary foreign workers, what's happening, India is just as much or more of a problem, so we can't let them get a free ride, especially because now more than ever, it's important to protect the domestic local populations during these transitionary periods. The last thing we need is taxpayer dollars getting set on fire because foreign people continue to abuse our systems that are set up to help protect and service the local populations, not even getting into breaking down social cohesion and how much better things could be. But if you made it this far in the video, you absolutely rock. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Trying to get these videos out in front of more people. We are trying to grow the channel. If you want to support the channel, you can do it directly through the link down below. You can also do it through YouTube. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.